Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick hurling podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined again this week by Ruairi, Walsh and Kieran Collins. Lads, how are things?
Good, Mark.
Not too bad, Mark.
Great, I suppose. Thanks for all the nice comments with Rory Jacob on last week. It was great to have him on. Wish him all the best for the upcoming season. I suppose tonight, guys, let's review Cusack Park, Ennis. I know, Rory, you're eager to get involved on that one. Limerick's emphatic win over Clare. We'll get Rory and Kieran's reaction to that. We'll also look at round 3 fixtures in Munster and Leinster. It's action-packed anyway. We'll have previews there, along with Joe McDonough returns after the bye week. Some intriguing fixtures there. And maybe if we have time, we'll look at the Munster Under-20 Hurling Championship semi-final preview between Cork and Clare, which will be on Wednesday night. I suppose let's start from the start. Cusack Park, Ennis. I know last week we were eagerly looking forward to this fixture. But Rory, didn't think in my wildest dreams as a Limerick hurling fan that we'd be going out of Cusack Park with a 15-point win. I suppose get your thoughts on this 118 to 230 loss for Clare.
Yeah, well, I suppose there's two perspectives of looking at it, like from the Limerick point of view, and I'm sure Kieran will go into a bit in that. Just they looked awesome on the day. Their power, pace, just their link play led Clare in a merry dance. I'd say they won almost every position in the pitch. Definitely all 6 Limerick forwards got the beating of their man. And look, they put in a massive performance. From a Clare point of view, it was absolutely shambolic. The setup, first of all. Look, there was warning signs going back to the Dublin game in the league final about the space Clare were affording teams. Then went into championship against Waterford, conceded 4 goals, and if it wasn't for Quilligan, it could have been another 2. So there was another big warning. And yet we had a situation on Sunday where for the first Limerick goal, I actually was watching it back this evening. It took me 48 hours to be able to sit down and try and rewatch it. But I paused the screen and there was 2 of our half-back line in Limerick's half. And this is for a throw-in now. It's not like that we were attacking or anything like that. And Colin Malone was outside our 65. So none of the Clare half-back line were in their positions. And there was 50 yards of space for Limerick to burst through. And in fairness, Nash linking up. And I thought that was a genius move as well. Having Nash kind of going on Duggan early, where it meant that every time Limerick broke, they knew Duggan wouldn't, have the legs to chase Nash up the field. And I thought early on in the game, Nash attacking as like an extra forward for Limerick. That moment alone just showed that Clare had learned nothing from the previous 2 games. And and I actually said to the lads next to me to game, I think it was 1-1 to 2 points after that goal. I said, I can't see Clare winning if this is our shape. And it proved that was the shape, but not only was the shape wrong, they didn't have the fight, that fire that you'd associate with Clare Limerick games. It was all on one side. And look, it just left a situation where I think it's our biggest defeat in Ennis and God knows how long, and our worst performance, and I think it was 2019, something similar happened, but at least that was in the Gaelic grounds. And then going back and thinking 1993 Munster final at Tipperary, that's how bad things were. Yeah, I just wonder as well, surely, with players meeting and management meetings, surely this has come up for discussion, the shape of the back line and this man for man following players all over the pitch. There has to have been disagreement about it. And you just wonder that when Limerick got ahead, are some of the senior Clare players beginning to think there's only one way this result is going due to how open we are. And look, it's a hard one to take, but they have to bounce back now, and hopefully they didn't learn after the first time or the second time. Hopefully they've learned after the third time, and I hate to say it, but go sweeper and close up that space and don't leave our full back line so exposed, because otherwise it doesn't matter what you score, you're eventually going to come a cropper by conceding too much. And so it proved on Sunday.
Yeah, Kieran, get you in there, I suppose. Get your assessment of this performance from a Limerick perspective.
Yeah, I think for Limerick, look, there were certain aspects while they did perform well against Cork. I suppose there's a Ray Boyne, the analysis had a stat sheet, I suppose, where Limerick had improved in all areas. So while the performance was good against Cork, I suppose the critical ones like shooting accuracy, were lower, like 55% against Cork from play, up to 75% against Clare. So I suppose while the performance, I suppose, is key for Kylie. You hear him time and time again getting interviewed. He always talks about performance and their KPIs. They were all up. The effort and the work that went into that Cork game a week later, Limerick did raise the bar. So look, there was two sides to it. I agree with Rory. Like, while Clare didn't bring much of a fight, I think Limerick were vastly improved. Now, be it that their own skill level or their own work level, or was it just, there wasn't as much opposite, or as much pressure on them, especially the forwards. Like, to be fair to Cork last week, I thought Cork forwards worked very, very hard. Like, Limerick found it very hard to get the ball out at times. That wasn't there from Clare, so I think Limerick probably had it easier at times. I suppose you have to be happy with a lot of aspects, or even looking at scores like Shane O'Brien. A little bit of pressure on him, I would have said, where you're kind of looking at him he's a good player, and has he reached his ceiling yet? And I don't think he has. But scoring 6 points in the loss of Galan, Peter Casey as well, scoring 3 points. That's 9 points between the two. You have to be really happy with that. I do think there's question marks going forward. I think Aidan O'Connor is more suited to the full forward line than the half forward line. I think 1-3 from play. He just looks more comfortable in there. So I think that's going to raise question marks going down the line. I think you have to be really happy. Barry Nash, I think I might have said last week, I was kind of thought he was poor, but he was really good today, getting up the field, making them runs all the time, making himself available. I suppose back to what we've seen in the last couple of years. Really, really surprised with Clare. I think when going in at half time, was it 13 points down, you're expecting a different team to come out. We saw it last year when they played Cork. Cork had a big lead, Clare brought it back. But in that period, at the start of the second half, first 10, 12 minutes, Limerick were really poor. Like, they weren't scoring, they weren't getting shots off, but there was no fight from Clare either. And that's really what surprised me, was coming out after the break, where was that fight? I think initially, once the Tony Kelly hit the penalty, Rogers hit a score from play directly after it. It was back to 10. There was a bit of a roar from the Clare crowd, and I thought, right, we have a game coming here. But I think Limerick scored the next 4 points, and I think that kind of games that match at that stage. And I think from there, Limerick, powered on, were definitely the stronger team in the last quarter. But I think while we're applauding Limerick in their play in the first half, they are dipping in the quarters of the match. Like, just that third quarter for me, I suppose if you're looking at that Kilkenny team in the tier zeros, the foot was on the throat for 70 minutes. And I think that's one thing that Limerick have so far this year. They're, when they put it together, they seem nigh on impossible to defend against them. But it's this switch off period for 10, 12 minutes in the game, where teams could do serious damage. I think that's something that, management will be looking at going forward. I think, look, we'll touch on Clare a little bit more, Roy, there, but I just think that I was really surprised that the fight wasn't there. Like, looking at scoring, Mark Rogers had the most scores from play with 2 points. Aside from that, a couple of players at 1. It was all over the field, Yeah, I just really surprised with Clare's lack of fight. Definitely early second half as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kieran. Great summary there. I suppose, Rory, get you back in here as well. I mean, let's look at it from an open half perspective. I think you've alluded to it already, that space in that middle third. I mean, Cathal O'Neill was deployed into the half forward line, running into space, creating those gaps. Clare's half back line obviously been moved out of shape, but saying that, man of the match went to Nicky Quaid here, Rory, and I thought there was maybe one or two key stages, particularly in that opening half, where if Clare had gotten goals, and thinking of the Sean Finn intercept in that second quarter, and also there was a fantastic save. Mind you, Sean Finn probably lucky not to be penalised with a penalty in the opening half. So even though Clare were struggling, they seemed to create some goal-scoring chances of their own.
Yeah, they did. And like that first one you mentioned there, Mark, the interception, where it was a 2-on-1, let's say, Kelly had O'Donnell inside. At that stage, it would have been similar to the Cork-Limerick game when Cork got that goal against the run of play. And like, if Clare had got it, like, they needed something like that to kind of get the crowd going. But I thought that was a vital one, because Limerick went up the field and got a point straight from that play. It could have been something to ignite the crowd and then the team. But just for me as well, just even watching it back today, the massive comparison is both half forward lines, like the work rate of O'Neill and Hegarty, working back up the wings, compared to like I don't think any of the Clare half hours even passed back into their own half. Not that I can remember. I think Sean Rinn had one possession in the first half. I don't remember him having any tackles. So like just to compare the half forward lines, you see the difference in the teams on the day. If you're going to play your half back line gung ho, your half forward line have to be coming back and helping them. I think that's the basics of any hurling team now from any ages. You have to have your half forward line working their socks off. Limerick's movement, as we know, is terrific and everything. I'm not expecting the same out of Clare because you're looking at Hegarty and so on, but you're expecting the same work rate. You're expecting the same desire, and that was completely lacking. And I'd say Peter Duggan is the only Clare forward really that, really took the fight to Limerick, and he kept going till the end as well. And I think it was pretty similar, actually. I was thinking back to that game in 2019, the Gaelic Rounds, the same scenario. And Duggan was the only guy as well there that day that kind of, could walk off with his head held high from the forward line. For me, Tony Kelly doesn't look fit. Even though with Waterford he got four or 5 points, but they're kind of on the fringe, of play. The same energy he usually brings, like zipping around, that wasn't there. Like Tony Kelly in flying form probably would have taken that shot himself. And then in the second half, there was one where he had a chance of a shot and he turned back into his left side where all the traffic was and got blocked down. Yeah, and then I suppose probably the other incident, the penalty goal one, and you can't, the referee had no bearing on the result, but it's bizarre. Like, I know we're talking about black card rules, but you have to have the same application at both ends of the field. And like Nash, either was a black card or a second yellow. So I heard, I think Michael Dygan was saying, well, he wasn't dragged down, but then it was a second yellow. Like, so look, either way, it's just a bizarre decision from the referee, and like these need to be stamped out in the championship because it could cost a team at a in a tighter game when there's maybe a trophy on the line or something like that. But look, anyway, you're right. Clare did create 4 chances, and Nicky Quaid made an unbelievable save off Rodgers, because when you see it again in the replay, he's actually going. He's expecting Rodgers to go, let's say, near post, and he's already moving the wrong way, and yet can adjust and get down. Just shows tremendous reflexes, and also. I think he's the best goalie in Ireland. If a ball comes in, a dirty ball in, and he's been surrounded like forwards putting pressure on him, just to stay composed and get that ball out of there, never gets turned over or intercepted, and stays calm and is able to clear his lines or makes the right decision coming out with the ball. And I think sometimes goalies who do all the shot stopping and stuff get the plaudits, but it's a lot of that managers will really appreciate, that dirty kind of ball in that a lot of goalies hate, and yet Nicky is so comfortable with them. It's going to be hard for Clare to pick themselves up. At the same time, there has to be a reaction, or they're going to be out of the Munster Championship. There needs to be more zip. I would make, I was just thinking today, I was writing out my team for the tip game, and I had 6 starting changes. Like, some guys who started the last day cannot start again. And for me as well, just basic errors like Ruairi Hayes has a lot of intercounty experience, and for him to stand up there take about 3 or 4 seconds to strike a ball, get blocked down, like this is stuff that these are mistakes you cannot do in Munster Championship. And then just the gung-ho attitude of trying to win every ball at cornerback, and you just see sometimes you have to be able to defend the man from behind, like Sean Finn, Mike Casey did at times, where you're not going to get to the ball first, but you do make sure the forward doesn't get inside you. If he's going to shoot, it's under pressure. But sometimes it looks with the Clare backs that they go 100% for the ball, and if they don't win it, then they're wide open and they're turned, and suddenly they're running back towards their own goal. Yeah, like Adam Hogan as well. I don't know. I know he missed the whole league, but he had a really poor performance. Like a couple of years ago when he first came on the scene, he was attacking ball and winning ball. Now he just seems to be more focused on the man he's marking rather than trying to get out in front of the ball. So look, there's a couple of different things, and the gas thing was Niall O'Farrell, who, like, it was still a bizarre decision to put him at centre back, considering he's never ever played there in his life, and he's thrown in there in Munster Championship. I thought he hurled all right, but his positioning was all over the shop. He was following Cathal O'Neill out to the sideline, both sidelines 2 or 3 times, and it's the one position you always tell a guy, you got to hold the centre back position. Like, obviously he was doing this against Waterford as well, and obviously the management think this is the way to go follow your men everywhere and man and stuff. But look, it didn't work against Waterford to an extent because it was the forwards bailed them out that day. And definitely didn't work at the weekend, and they just need to go back to, I think, just having your solid half back line sitting on your 45. Like, another thing, I was comparing the half forward lines, but even the half back lines, Limerick half back line were so close to their full back line when the ball went over their heads that they were there. Dermot Burns in particular, back deep, and Will O'Donoghue. I can't remember Will O'Donoghue marauding forward like at any stage. He held the centre, cut off all space there for Clare, whereas at the other end it was open season. So I do think Niall O'Farrell deserves to keep his place, but put him out in the wing. You know, he's a good hurler. He got a lovely point as well, and I thought he didn't give up and fought hard. It's just too much to put him in centre back in his first season there. There's a lot, you know, you need to have been playing there. So look, there's a lot for management to think about. You know, you'd have to be critical of management here for not reading the warning signs. I think Clare need to go back to maybe putting in John Conlon, putting in a sweeper, having Conlon with his experience sweeping in behind that half back line, and go with the 5 forwards at the other end. We could still put out 5 decent forwards that would cause trouble to a team, because if we keep going the way we're going, we're going to be out of this championship very quickly.
Kieran, get you in there. I suppose Limerick perspective wise, maybe discipline comes into the team of maybe scope for improvement here. Did 5 yellow cards, including the second yellow from Adam English. His second yellow on Dermot Stritch. I suppose maybe a focus area for John Kiley, Paul Clark to kind of tidy up ahead of the Waterford game in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, I think it's it's probably been an ongoing issue with this Limerick team is they do play on the edge, I suppose, and it's knowing where the line is. I thought Michael Kenny, and I don't rate him. I suppose I was in Parnell last year when with the Dublin goal against Wexford, and I think the first half I think he handled it pretty well. I thought he gave yellow cards for offences that were on the soft side, and then there were, I suppose other parts of the game where yellows could have been given and he didn't give them. I suppose if you're looking at the hit on Dermot Burns' hit on Shane O'Donnell, I suppose with the review, I thought it might have been, I suppose, a little bit off the shoulder. It could have been a yellow card, and I suppose O'Donnell's to me was very similar on Shane O'Brien. So, like, if it's a yellow for one, I think it should be yellow for the other. Same with the black card. Like, there's nothing like Barry Nash. I think that rule is too grey. I think they need to clean it up. I think get rid of the permutation. I think it should be, if it's a goal scoring opportunity, it's a black card. If that's the way they want to keep going with it, there shouldn't be. I think I heard him on the commentary saying that because Adam Hogan pulled intercounty to the ground, that's what. But like, if it's a goal scoring opportunity, it's a goal scoring opportunity. I would agree. It should have been a black card there. I will just one point on that. I think it was poor taste from Lohan in the media after the game. I suppose kind of poor us. We've got 5 black cards in game for other teams that aren't receiving them. I suppose, like, I don't know. Is that the time and place for that, or as my view, and is it a reflection of, is their last ditch defending? If they're so open at the back, is their last ditch defending where this is why they're getting these black cards? I've taken a beating like that, and as Roy said, the warning signs were there. I think that the hand has to go up and say this is our fault, and take responsibility for it. Back to your question, Mark, about the discipline. I think, look, as I said, discipline is probably Limerick do play on the edge. It's finding that line of where players don't walk. I think Adam English, look, he probably did deserve the red. I think the second yellow probably, in way, like, I think forwards are getting very, very good at buying frees and I know making it look worse than an offence may be. But this is the way the game has gone, and referees are reffing what they see in front of their eyes. So you can't continue winning games or expecting to win games if you're finishing with 14 players. So definitely, I think it'll be something that they'll have to look at going forward. Because you hit Munster final or possibly an All Ireland final down the line, and if you get down to 14, and if there's a black card offence, you're down to 13. It's very hard to win these games. With less players in the field.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Kieran. And I think maybe Limerick management might have to take a lesson learned here. Given that Adam English was on the yellow, thought after maybe 45 minutes he was starting to flag, starting to tire a little bit. Maybe it was the opportune time to maybe put on the Ethan Hurleys to just basically freshen it up in midfield, but that's for another day. I suppose, Rory, coming back to you then in terms of Clare, And maybe it's a team coming into this Munster Senior Hurling Championship. We've seen how teams have really kind of improved based on a fixture. I'm talking about maybe Cork's a fixture against Tipperary facing Limerick, who came in cold, and maybe the performance levels from Limerick weren't quite right in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. And the same here, Limerick having a good hard game under their belt against Cork, coming in then immediately against Clare, and maybe Clare maybe a little bit out cold here, a little bit here, Rory, as well. So it'll be interesting to see this reaction from Clare coming into this crunch game in Thurles against Tipperary in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, look, and sometimes a team can be particularly flat on a day, and if you're flat, like the worst team to be in that situation against is Limerick. And just looking last year, we had a situation where Limerick beat Cork 17 points, and Cork, beat them in penalties in the Munster final a couple of weeks later and ended up in the Ireland final. Get their act together now and learn from the mistakes. They're still in the championship. They have 2 points out of 4. Same as Limerick at the minute, on the table. Obviously, score difference is a bit different after the weekend. But they're still there and it's still in their own hands. And if they beat Tipperary, providing either Cork or Limerick beat Waterford, then Clare are going to be through. So they have to put all their eggs into the basket here, beating Tipperary, and get things right for this game. Get a performance, get the right team in the pitch. And yeah. And look, just going back to what Kieran said, I presume Lohan's frustration, I suppose, was probably the 2 incidents you probably mentioned, Kieran, where, yellow for one incident wasn't for the other, and then a black card for one wasn't the other. And even the Shane O'Brien-McInerney one, where they were both inside. McInerney's only after coming on, so you can be sure he gave the usual kind of shoulder to the forward. But then, as we saw from later on the camera, he does get flung to the ground, and then the refs come in and book. Now, that was the umpires who gave him the information, but the book one and not the other. I suppose all those kind of things leave a mark. But you're right, though, Lohan has put his hands up here. The biggest responsibility, I suppose, here is getting your team set up properly. And, it was glaring that they weren't. But that has to be the priority in the next 2 weeks. So, yeah, look, as you said, Mark, Cork definitely improved. Clare had that game against Waterford, had the break. I don't know if it was a real factor. I thought it might give them a bit of an advantage just having the fresh legs, but I suppose with the backroom teams they're there now, and S&C teams and everything, like Limerick looked fresher this week than they did last week, and that was after a match where they were playing with 14 men. They were hopping around the place. So yeah, look, with the professionalism of the backroom setups and recovery and all that, I'd say that players are fully recovered in 48 hours at the minute. So yeah, playing week to week doesn't seem to make as much a difference as it did in the past. But yeah, look, it's going to be a tough one, but they have to get their act together, and it just means that it's knockout hurling from now on, and Tip and Clare and Thurles in 2 weeks' time. One team is going to go out of the championship on that day. I think now Clare might still have an outside chance if they can go down and beat Cork and Páirc Uí Chaoimh, but you'd fancy if things go wrong and Thurles, it's going to be really hard to get their act together for that one.
I just want to jump in there, Mark. Just one point. I think, I wouldn't say the Clare will use an excuse, but I think the 2 weeks after a win, I think the 2 weeks is the perfect time to get ready for your next championship game. You have the first week, a couple of days for recovery, get back on the training field again, and it's Munster Championship. This is it's a short window.
Should have been an advantage.
Yeah, Clare's been flat. I don't think we can blame it on a 2 week break over one. I think Limerick, it's a lot easier to get back on the field 6-7 days later after a loss. So I think, from a Clare point of view, having the 2 week break after a win, I think it's the perfect time. Allows recovery time. Any lads that may have a little niggle, just an extra day or two rest if needed, and get back doing a bit of training on the field. But I think from Limerick point of view, I think there probably was a lot of hurt after that Cork game, and I suppose points to prove really, because while going into that game they were being talked as All-Ireland favourites, and based on one loss where it still only was a 3-point game, and they played 20 minutes with 14 men, they were being talked up then of possibly not making the three. So we've talked about the round robin being a roller coaster, and it surely is. I'm sure there'll be twists and turns again the weekend coming, but I think from their point of view, they were probably delighted to get back out 6-7 days later, and I suppose to try and any critics that they may have just to shove it up them. Really, I suppose that the performance, as I said, the performance levels, the stats don't lie. They were up on all facets that Ray Boyne had measured. They were up on every one of them. So I'm sure psychologically that's a big part of it, was the hurt of the Cork game.
Yeah, absolutely agree, guys. I mean, I think for Clare, accountability definitely in this retrospective this week will be key moving into the rest of the season. I think management definitely have to hold their hands up on the setup, certainly, but also the players have to take responsibility, particularly on work rate and application during the game against Limerick. And again, as you say, it's do or die, Rory. And also Limerick-wise, good to see Dara Donovan get great game minutes for midfield. Thought he orchestrated very well. O'Donoghue looked very solid in half back, along with Darren Burns, who has actually started the season quite strong as well. Another 1-2 to his name. And again, it was good to see Tom Morrissey, Dan Morrissey from a hand come in. Thought Dan Morrissey come in, and particularly the last 5-8 minutes, nothing went past him. So I think that might be a selection poser for Paul Kinnerk and John Kiley moving forward. But again,
Peter Casey as well, Mark.
Exactly.
Peter Casey was outstanding.
Exactly.
For a guy fighting for his place, and very hard to take the jersey off him for the next game, no matter who's coming back in.
Well, that's right. I think with Tom Morrissey, Tom was, in my eyes, sloppy enough at times. I think he needed that game. I think I suppose he's been out for a good while, and I think that game might stand to him. There was another stage where he missed a pick up in front of goal, and I think had he got it first time, there was a goal on.
Yeah.
I think as well there is improvement still there in that team. I think Kyle Hayes has come into this year, maybe not on the same form he's shown the last couple of years. Like a couple of occasions in 2 games now where he's been sloppy, he's been turned over, done for over carrying, and things where you wouldn't usually see of him. So while we're saying the Limerick players did win every position, or probably 90% of them, there's still scope for improvement as well.
No, absolutely, guys. So look, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, Rory. I suppose Clare will have better days, and maybe starting with Thurles in 2 weeks' time as well. So look, all eagerly anticipated. And Limerick do get into their homestand now, starting with an intriguing game against Waterford. Before Waterford can focus on Limerick, they have a pretty interesting game coming up in Walsh Park on Saturday evening. Rory against Cork, who are minus Kieran Joyce, who's out sidelined for the year with the ACL. We wish him well. And also Downey is going to be sidelined for a few weeks as well. So with the spine of the Cork defence gone, do you feel there's an opportunity knocks here moment for Waterford to maybe secure a win, repeat the dose from 2 years ago in Walsh Park against Cork?
Absolutely, yeah. They have to be buoyant after their second half showing against Tipperary. And look, they have Caleb Lyne seems to be getting stronger as the competition goes on. Tyg de Burka made an appearance. I think it's important to get him in there. Just like Paddy Levy, there's a lot of link play, but just as a centre back, he just doesn't look like centre back has to have the ability to strike at times as well, strike a long ball into full forward line. So he's missing there, and I think he'll slot in somewhere else in the field a bit better. But Tyg de Burka back as well, and then look, the forward line, Bennett is playing incredible stuff, and for Cork to be down their 2 central players and have Bennett on the form he's in. Like Waterford keep it pretty simple. Like they're launching route 1 every time they get a chance to get Bennett, 1-on-1 or even 1-on-2 inside. They're going direct into him. It's just something that Cork have struggled with in the past, and I think Waterford will have their opportunity. They can't afford to do what they did in the first half against Tipperary and give space to Cork. We saw how tip forwards thrived when given that space, and we know exactly what Cork can do when, in a similar situation. So there is, this could be a right humdinger of a game. Looking forward to it. And if Waterford win this, it's cat amongst the pigeons, and it sets up the rest of the group. But the only thing you're thinking of, Cork do have a point to prove going down there. They've had a poor record against Waterford. Even last year in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, Waterford hit the post that would have put them level with a few minutes to go. And I know Cork finished strongly then, but there was chances for Waterford in that game as well. So Waterford don't fear Cork. They often, they think they have their number at times, especially down in Walsh Park. And just the way they finish the game, you'd have to give them a good chance of really putting it up to Cork and asking questions of, what's going to be kind of a makeshift centre-back, full-back. And I know you're saying, well, Owen Downey can start in full-back, and that's where he played last year, but struggled at times there, and that's why he's probably out. And I thought he was hurling really well wing-back this year. And then Cahalane probably comes into the equation as well, who's been targeted in the past. So it does give Waterford serious hope. But as we said, Waterford are forewarned. They know the potential Cork are forewarned. They know the potential Waterford have. They saw what they did in the second half, and they won't be going down there cocky. They'll be going down there fully aware of the threat Waterford have. So I don't see Cork like slipping up in terms of concentration this time. I think if they're beaten, it'll be due to Waterford exploiting that weakness at the back.
Kieran, get you in there. I suppose what's standing out for you in this fixture?
Rory, is the first time we ever heard of Cork being described as not being cocky. Now would be a strange one. Yeah, I think full back, especially with Waterford's. I suppose they're, Sean Walsh and Mikey Kiley having them inside. They're going to be obviously the huge aerial threat for him. Personally, I think Cahalane will probably slot in there. I think he'll match just was Sean Walsh or Kiley well. I think Rory hit the nail on the head with Lyons. He has been, he was away for I think 2 years, getting back up to the speed of the game again. I'd like to see him on Mark Coleman's wing there, where Coleman likes to get forward, and it may allow Lyons a bit more space. And I suppose if he could get running that goal, he'd be a player that could do serious damage. At the other end for Waterford, Levy did move up the last day, Rory. He moved up to midfield where Iarla Daly sat in 6. I think they need to get their. I'm not sure what the story is with Prunty. I think they need to get Prunty, if they can, back in to free up Mark Fitzgerald. If they can get Prunty and Tyke de Burke back in just for that stability in front of goal, and allow Fitzgerald to maybe play wing back and get forward, I think that would be a huge plus for them. Yeah, look, I think Waterford, they're playing probably some of the best hurling we've seen from them in the last couple of years. They're playing with pride. I suppose in ways they've nothing to lose. They're probably expected in ways to competition has started. They haven't qualified yet. Their record is very, very poor in it. So in ways that, I suppose, while they are at home, I don't think there's much pressure on them. I think most of the pressure will be on Cork. And I think all eyes will be how Cork deal with 3 and 6 for this game. I think if the Waterford crowd can get in behind them, I suppose Cork would be, they're like vultures with tickets. They'll try to snap them all up. But if the Waterford crowd can get in, get loud, and I suppose if they can kick off where they left off the last day against Tipperary, and I suppose and pose question marks to Cork. Get down, get in their throat, don't give them space, to make it as hard as they can for them. I still think Cork will come through the fixture, but for Waterford, I think it would just throw the whole competition wide open. If they do get a win, it then leads Cork on to have to get a win again the last day. Against Clare in their last game. And I suppose that's for, I suppose, depending on the results as they go. But I think if Waterford do sneak a win here, they've only one game left against Limerick, and it's all to play for them. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I hope it's a humdinger game. I think we've been treated to great hurling so far, and I suppose I hope Waterford can carry on and hit Cork in their vulnerable areas, I suppose.
Absolutely, guys. And the one thing about Waterford has been they've had lulls during contests, but in the last 2 games they've played against Clare and Tipperary, their final quarter showing has been very impressive. They've really powered into the games, even though they've had some shot accuracy issues, particularly against Tipperary, where I think some people may argue they should have really won that game. And I suppose, Rory, it's really do or die for this Waterford team. I'm thinking of the likes of Jamie Barron here, thinking about Stephen Bennett, thinking of other guys here that maybe this is do or die for them in terms of getting to the latter stages of Munster and an All-Ireland series. So they're going to leave it all out on the table here against Cork and really match Cork physicality-wise, which I think Waterford really did do against Limerick, particularly in the league in that round 2 encounter earlier on in the year.
Yeah, and you can throw Desi Hutchinson into that mix as well. He's been around now for nearly all of the whole round robin phase, you could say. Interestingly enough, Mark, Sean Mackey there came in at half time, and I thought swung the midfield in favour of Waterford. He was everywhere. And interesting, I was listening to Peter Queally afterwards, and they were kind of asking him, like, where was this guy from the start? He was saying how he had picked up a knock for the under-20s. He'd have started up in Ennis. Like, he spoke of how highly he rated him. So I'm just looking forward to seeing him. I presume he's going to start against Cork now with the way he played in that game. Just interesting to see how he gets on the full game against the Cork midfield, which, at times can be kind of quiet. I thought Tim O'Mahony took a long time to settle into the Cork-Limerick game, and might be a chance for Waterford, to get early dominance there. But you're right about their physicality. They're big men, Waterford. Even, the strong guys like, I know we mentioned Caelan Lyons earlier today, a few lads like that, but even the likes of Darragh Lyons, guys that aren't the tallest, are just physical, powerful men. And another factor, I suppose, like Austin Gleeson, he's been used off the bench in both games. Is he going to be getting sharper and sharper? Because he hasn't played a lot of intercounty hurling in the last 3 or 4 years either. And look, we know he does have that magic, you know, and can do great things. Like he got an unbelievable score against Clare when just after coming in, but then didn't really feature, you know, in the rest of the game. But the longer he's training with them and getting up to pace of things, you know, he could become a factor as well, especially being brought in if the game is still tight near the end. But I'm tending to agree with Kieran. I just think that Cork might have a bit too much for them. They're something a bit like, we've said this a few years, but there is something a bit different about them this year, Cork. They have seemed to be a bit steelier, you know, and especially I think their forwards as well. They're getting a lot more work from their forwards, which at times was questionable in the past. And I just kind of see it just getting out of jail maybe below in Walsh Park. I can see it being one-sided in Cork's favour, or Waterford's. I can see it being tight and tough, but maybe Cork just having, like, Cork have the better forwards, let's be honest. When it's open play, their fine scores easier to come by. I think that could be the difference. And I know it's a tight pitch below there and everything, but I just think, you know, Cork, as we saw, even against Limerick backs, any bit of space at all, like Hayes and these lads can, you know, get ridiculous scores. So yeah, I'm going to give Cork a nod here to, you know, get that important win.
Who would you play at 3 and 6, Rory?
Yeah, I probably, look, it's a hard one to go, like, due to the experience of maybe Downey playing last year at 3. Yeah, well, I suppose, yeah, I'd nearly go Downey at 6 and Cahalan at 3. I'd start him there, like, but I don't know.
I think just for the aerial with Sean Walsh and Kylie going to be in there, he's probably best suited to that.
Yeah, and Darragh O'Leary, isn't it, who had played a lot of the league games, doesn't seem to be. Is he injured at the minute? I'm not sure. Cormac O'Brien might come into the team at wing back. That might be a move that'll happen if Downey goes into the centre. But yeah, look, they have to get that one right. But you're right, in terms of physicality, the two boys are big men that should be able to deal with the aerial threat.
They've also played Tim O'Mahony at 6 as well at times, haven't they?
They have.
Yeah.
So they could put him back and maybe bring in Ethan Toomey midfield.
Yeah, they have options.
They have options, like, yeah.
And just interesting as well, because you mentioned, Mark, earlier, the under-20 game tomorrow night, whether Barry Walsh will play in that, because, you know, a lot of counties would have a thing that if you're going to be starting at the weekend for your senior team, you don't play the previous game, and probably a bit of a dilemma with Cork now, because it is a Munster semi-final tomorrow night, and they won't want Barry Walsh getting injured. I thought he was excellent against Limerick at times, coming back deep and winning a bit of ball and just driving at Limerick with a bit of pace. And that's going to be important down in Waterford as well, that you have forwards that can, you know, carry the fight to Waterford. So it'd be interesting to see whether he plays tomorrow night or whether he's held in reserve for Walsh Park.
Yeah, all indications, though, I think, from Cork management and under-20s is Barry Walsh is available for selection. So, look, it's a Munster semi-final at the end of the day here, Rory. So, look, I think Cork would be living with regret if they haven't basically lined out Barry Walsh, particularly for that contest. Yeah, I'm slightly hedging towards Cork, but only just. I think this Cork defensive unit going to get a massive test at the weekend, because, look, this Waterford forward line, they've scored 7 goals in 2 games. You could easily put another 2 or 3 in that column, given goal chances that they've missed against Tipperary and Clare. So if the Cork defensive line can remain unscathed here, I think this is a big boost for Ben O'Connor management moving forward. I think Jeremy Ellerick as well might get some game time as well, particularly in that half-back line. If it is a case that Owen Downey is going back there to maybe counter Sean Walsh, I think it's going to be fascinatingly poised. But again, look, it's all or nothing here for Waterford. They can't depend to come down to TUS Gaelic grounds and look for a result against Limerick. They really have to leave it all on the line here on Saturday evening against Cork. So look, it's going to be an epic encounter, and wish both teams well. Suppose, lads, before we go, Leinster round 3, they had their bye week. The rankings so far, Galway in front, Dublin, Kilkenny, Wexford, Offaly, Kildare in that running order. And round 3 puts a few kind of intriguing ties. I suppose Kildare, Galway in Kildare, you have Wexford in Dublin, and also Offaly in Kilkenny. I suppose, guys, what's standing out for you in Leinster this year or this weekend, Rory?
I suppose, like, the Wexford Dublin game is the big one, and it'll probably decide third place. Saying that, Offaly will probably feel they can give Kilkenny a right chance, a right scare up in O'Connor Park. The way they played against Dublin at home, their forward line, and as you said, Mark, for 50 minutes of the game up in Salthill as well, they're extremely competitive. But home form is different, as we know, and if they can upset the odds here, Kilkenny, it does throw everything open, like, because Kilkenny still have to play Dublin then as well. Yeah, so they're the two standout ones. Like Galway Kildare, there's only going to be one winner in that one, regardless of who's at home there. Up in Newbridge, like, it hasn't been probably the fortress Kildare wanted it to be. Wexford came up there, and I know it was tight for a while, but came away with a comfortable enough win by the 70th minute. Yeah, so they're the two ones, I suppose. It's nearly getting to knockout phase. If Wexford lose to Dublin, it's very hard to see them coming back. They'll have to beat Galway, and the way Galway are going, that's really hard to see. And Offaly Kilkenny, it could be a funny one. Like, I know Kilkenny looked really impressive the last day, but as I said, Offaly are kind of still full of confidence as well. I don't think that they lost any of that from the Galway game, and we know their forward line are really dangerous, and if they can get a couple of goals early on against Kilkenny and get the home crowd believing and everything, I probably see that as maybe being a tighter game than Wexford and Dublin.
Kieran, get you in there. I know you're living down in Wexford, I suppose. What's the feeling down in Wexford heading into this crunch game against Dublin?
Yeah, I suppose on the back of the last game where Kilkenny beat them by 16 points, I suppose there's been a little bit of soul searching, I imagine, in the setup. The news is that Shane Reck won't feature. He broke his thumb against Kilkenny. So, I think he's going to be a huge loss. You're looking at, I suppose, historically over the last couple of years, he has picked up Cian O'Sullivan. Obviously, the man mountain head Joe, as they call him, John Henderson, is going to be there full forward. I think Liam Ryan, I think he's probably the only Wexford player capable of trying to hold him, just with the size. I do expect Simon Donoghue to come back in. I think Wexford were probably weak. I think Derek Harley struggled a bit the last day. I would expect Simon Donoghue in that full back line. Going forward, I suppose they were very poor in the forward unit against Kilkenny. There would be huge question marks there. With Jack O'Connor, I suppose it was nearly a non-performance for him. He did play the following day with St. Martin's in a challenge game. I suppose for management, there's probably huge question marks. So who do the players like Jack or Jack Redmond, are they dropped? I think like Killian Byrne, looked lively when he came on. I think Sean O'Connor or Sean Rowley got a couple of minutes. I thought his link play was very good. Just with their younger guys chomping at the bit to get going. Keane Byrne is supposedly back from injury. Will he feature? So I suppose there is question marks in the extra team. Look, I suppose they have built a little bit of a rivalry against Dublin the last couple of years, but while I suppose I'm on record saying that Dublin, I think, have gone back a little bit on last year's form, I do think they're going to be too strong for Exeter. I think that, I suppose the players that they have up front, where Exeter probably are still, it's not still, they always have been, I suppose, a little bit reliant on Lee Chin, but I think just Dublin have more firepower with, Donald Burke, the last day Fergal Whiteley got 2 goals. John Heatherton is going to be a handful. But I think Dublin's midfield is going to be the winner of the game. I think, Conor Donoghue, Conor Burke, exceptional players. And I think that's one area that probably Wexford are going to probably lacking a little bit. So for me, I think Dublin could win this by, 5-6 points. And it really is, I suppose, a cup final in ways, because the winner, you would expect with, their odds of shortened to make the top 3. I agree with Rory. And moving on to Offaly Kilkenny, I think Offaly are going to take real belief that last year they pushed them really close in Nolan Park, and it took a big Kilkenny effort to see it win over the line. They'll take huge confidence from that Dublin game at home. They're really, really impressive against Dublin at home. That the bookies have a 7-point handicap. I can see Offaly being within that. They have some very good forwards, and I suppose what Leo O'Connor said a couple of weeks ago here, that it really struck, is that they're working hard, and they're mad to get back to where they see themselves at the top table. And I think if they do put Kilkenny, I suppose it opens up that Leinster Championship wide open. But I think for me at the minute, I think I agree. There's no other. Galway will beat Kildare. I think Kildare will struggle there. I think Dublin beat Wexford. I'm just going to tip Kilkenny because, they are Kilkenny, but I think Offaly won't be far away in it.
I'm just intrigued. That Offaly Kilkenny game for me is the intriguing one. It's just to see where Kilkenny are actually at. Because, I mean, you really can't assess them given the performance of Wexford in round 2. And also, Offaly, they did show good signs of seeing them in Salt Hill. Is really to bring that performance in for full 70 minutes. And look, I think as Dave O'Connor's been on the show, he's named 4 or 5 guys there that could easily get on any other intercounty team. So it would be interesting to see if Offaly could make a solid start. And do remember, in the league this year, they ran Kilkenny extremely close down in Nolan Park. So there seems to be a level of confidence here in Offaly that if they can get things right, their matchups right, that they're well in contention here. I still would edge it for Kilkenny, but again, I think the jury is definitely going to be reached on Kilkenny after this Offaly performance, where their heads are at and where their performance levels are. I think Galway will be experimenting a little bit in Kildare. No disrespect to Kildare, but I think Micheál O'Donoghue asked this fixture to come along quite nicely. To actually try out some squad players that haven't gotten game minutes so far in the championship. I'm thinking the likes of Conor Cooney here, who came on and was very prominent against Offaly in the last 20 minutes. I can see him getting cameos. Same with the likes of John Fleming, other guys as well, maybe getting some cameo time as well. So yeah, I think Galway with a heavy win there. I think over Kildare, unfortunately. Jack Sheridan's played superbly well for Kildare, but again, I think injuries are starting to mount for Kildare, unfortunately. Could be a tough afternoon for them on Saturday. And then obviously the Wexford-Dublin game, yeah, again, just look, I'd love to see Wexford competitive here, but again, it's the scoring power up front that seems to be swaying me to Dublin. I think there's more options for Dublin, particularly in the forward line and particularly in midfield to contribute, whereas Wexford really are depending on Leach in here a little bit too much. Yeah, I'd go with Dublin here, and that would set Dublin up nicely, but again, Dublin having to travel to Galway as well. Need to get a win under their belts here in Wexford, but look, it's all intriguingly poised. I suppose, guys, before we leave, Joe McDonagh, we haven't really covered too much in the last 3 episodes, but an awful lot has happened in Joe McDonagh, particularly around the Antrim camp, but take nothing away from Carlow and Down, who are 2 from 2. They face off in Ballynagran this weekend. Westmeath and Laois are on 1 win each, have a do-or-die championship tussle in Mullingar. And then Antrim facing a bit of a daunting trip to Ruairi on Sunday to face London, I suppose. Rory, get your thoughts here. I mean, Carlow Down, and I mean, you have to call it Down here. Ronan Sheehan again doing an outstanding job with Down. I know they had a bit of a baptism of fire, particularly in 1B this year. But again, they've regrouped well and 2 from 2. Again, this is going to be a tough game for Carlow, particularly in Ballynagran.
Yeah, this is a pivotal round, Mark, because as you mentioned, Westmeath, Laois and the Carlow Down game are huge games, and I think we'll have a clearer picture of what 2 teams are going to be going through to the final after this round. Down, the fact this is on up in Ballynagran, where Down have, traditionally really difficult to beat, I think gives Down a real chance. I wouldn't fancy them going down to Dr. Cullen Park if it was the other way around, but you'd have to give them a good chance at being at home. We know from the Sands up front, like they have that forward threat as well. To put up a big score, against Antrim in both games, that last round of the league where they beat Antrim and also in the first round of Joe McDonagh. So, look, they are threatening. And Carlow, I suppose, have been the form team as well. Like, they really put Laois to the sword. And, a lot of the talk about Laois, and I was talking them up as well here, guilty, based on, they look like they've got their act together this year. But look, Carlow's a difficult place to go. And Carlow have done this in the past as well, where they've just completely focused on championship and kind of let the league kind of, drift by. Yeah, it's going to be an intriguing round, and Westmeath as well, they've been competitive so far too, so got that win as well under their belt. So whoever wins that game is going to be, back in the driving seat as well. And if Down can somehow beat Carlow, it gives Down a great shout of making the Joe McDonagh final. That'd be 3 wins from 3. So yeah, I'd go with Laois to rebound, and I'll go with Carlow just to have too much experience as well with the Nolans and so on, just to get over the line up and down.
Absolutely, yeah. Kieran, get you in there. I suppose get your thoughts on Joe McDonagh this year and maybe round 3 predictions.
Yeah, I suppose the tie for me, I suppose, is the Down Carlow, 2 teams sitting top of the table. Look, Ballycran is such a hard place to go. I think good teams have struggled over there, up there over the years. I think for Carlow, they've impressed me so far under Pat Bennett. I think they've become a little bit more ruthless in front of goal. They've been scoring goals for fun in the 2 games. I think if they do get the win, I think they're all but probably in a Joe McDonagh final. Have to remember their series hurt there, the way they went out last year. Where that late goal from Laois. I just think Carlow will have enough there. And I think if they do that, like I said, I have them pressed. If they do, they're more than likely in the final. Westmeath and Laois, yeah, look, again, you'd have to pick Laois. I think they're probably disappointed with, I suppose, the way results have gone so far for them. But you would see him ahead of Westmeath on on top, aside from all of that. And then the other game, London Antrim, I mean, I heard Neil McManus in the Sunday game the other night saying that everything is rosy again in Antrim, but I suppose this is the test now. This is where we know. I think Antrim or London, while I suppose they're probably defeated in both games, they have been pretty competitive. Like so, it's a real tough test for Antrim, and I think if London do get a win, I think Davy may stay over there because I think his options will be fairly limited back here after. So I suppose look, tough test for him, especially away. You probably would expect Antrim on paper to have enough from, but I suppose how much of a hangover is there from this? I suppose we call it a farce that's been going on for the last 2 weeks. With their issues with the county board, is there a hangover from that? I suppose time will tell, but I think you'd have to go for Antrim just with the players they have, but it's a tough fixture nonetheless.
And London put up 217 away to Down. As you point out, they have been competitive. Yeah, if they're going to stay up, this is their one chance, isn't it? Because they'll have a head-to-head on Antrim if it comes down to them both being the bottom two. But yeah, look, just looking back to their first round, like Westmeath beat them 122 to 15 points over in London. So you'd fancy like Antrim should have enough, unless they're in disarray, which Neil McManus says they're not, but they could easily be. All signs are there might be a bit of disharmony going on. Well, whether between players and management, or management, the county board, or everyone together. But look, as we know, a win might bring them all back rosy together again as well. So yeah, it's as we said, it's kind of pivotal at both ends, isn't it? This round of Joe McDonagh games, because we're going to have a fair idea who's going to be in the final. Like Westmeath are going to have to beat Laois to get back into it, aren't they? This weekend, because they have that defeat to Carlow. So it's a big one for them. But again, just as we said, I'd fancy Laois, Carlow, and Antrim.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there, guys. I think Carlow have been definitely the form team, definitely goal poaching, 8 goals in their first 2 games, 4 goals each against Laois and also Westmeath. So, I mean, to be fair to Down, they have their work cut out for them. But again, in Ballynagran, as you say, tough place to go. And they did run Wexford extremely close in that one big league fixture at the start of the year. So, look, there is form guide here. So, look, Carlow will be under no illusions heading up north. That Down will provide a very stern test here. I will just go with Carlow by 1 or 2 points, but I expect fireworks in that one because Down are very capable of scoring heavy as well, particularly with their insightful forward line. Definitely Laois, Westmeath. I definitely would go with Laois because that Laois-Carlow game, even though it finished 4-17 to 117, Carlow did miss 2 or 3 gilt-edged opportunities during the first half alone. So I think, look, Laois have got back on their horse again after that win against Antrim at home. But again, I think it's a key one. Either Laois or Westmeath effectively are getting eliminated from Joe McDonagh, the final, whoever loses here. So it'll be a tight contest. If I'm hedging my bets, I'm probably going with Laois, even though Westmeath are the home team. And as for Antrim London, look, they can talk all they want about things being rosy back in the camp, but if London are 5 points up with 20 minutes to go, we're going to see fairly quickly here the morale of the team and the players and management, how they basically respond here, because I think London, there's a big performance in this London team. They've acquitted themselves quite well, particularly in that a home fixture against Westmeath, and also their away trip as well to Down had good moments as well. They've had a few weeks to prepare for this. So look, Antrim should be under no illusions going to Ruairi on Sunday afternoon. Anything but a good performance here will be sufficient here. I'm going to go draw here, guys. I'm just generally not convinced with Antrim this year in terms of where they're going. Where's their game plan? What's their vision? How they're going to play? And again, an awful lot of media behind them as well for negative. It can only eat in at the morale of a camp. So I think for me, London may have an opportunity here to maybe take a scalp off Antrim, but I'll go for a draw there as well. I suppose, guys, before we leave here, the under-20s Munster semi-final up for decision on Wednesday night. Clare playing Cork again down in Super Friday, Park O'Keefe, I suppose. Rory, you'd like to see a little bit of a bounce for Clare hurling. Do you give Clare under-20s a good chance against Cork on Wednesday night?
Yeah, well, just based off the last round, it was very competitive right till the end. Clare conceding a few goals like the senior team, but I think the last goal was just a bit of messing around the full back line, intercepted. So like there isn't nothing between the teams. Barry Walsh was a major influence in that game. I know you were indicating earlier, Mark, that he's available for selection, but just say that changes in the next 24 hours. It will give Clare a bit of a boost. This is a Clare team that won the All-Ireland Minor 3 years ago. I think it's important for them to try and get to a Munster final. There hasn't really been anything between Clare, Tip and Cork in this championship. Like Clare started poorly, and I think they've been improving as it's gone along. They snuck past both Waterford and Limerick, but probably gave their better displays away in Thurles, and even last week got a lot of nice scores down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. But yeah, it's it's going to be a classic, I'd say, and the fact it's on TG Carr, I think, I'm not sure if it's on the telly or live stream, but they're definitely showing it tomorrow evening. Gives a chance to get more hurling in case we're missing out between the weekends. So looking forward to it. And yeah, it's going to be a tall order for Clare. But if they can be a bit tighter at the back, a bit like the seniors, you never know. But it should be a close one.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Barry Walsh could be the key. I think if he does play, I suppose he's a player in such high form at the minute that, I suppose how do you handle him? I think, as Rory said, Clare have improved. There's not much between Clare, Cork, Tip. I think over the last couple of years, I think that they have been the three teams in Munster underage to be performing at the highest level. Really looking forward to it. Big prize at stake for them, and whatever lessons they may learn from the last game. But for me, I think if Barry Walsh does play like he's such a good player at that level to handle, we saw the goal, really, really impressive. So, but I'm not looking forward to it, and expect a good game.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And
he played in the last round, Mark. He scored 1-5, so he's decisive. He's important.
Yeah,
exactly. But
some goal he scored, wasn't it?
Absolutely phenomenal goal, wasn't it?
And just Mark, while we're here, the team is named, and he is named to start.
So, but yeah, to me, this written extra time all over it. Really, I think it's going to be an absolute classic. Really, do or die, proper championship fair here. Tipperary lying wait for the winners here. So, and I mean, whoever comes through this Clare Cork game going to be well battled hard and going into that Tipperary Munster final. So look, we'll review that in due course. Wish both teams well. I suppose, guys, we'll leave it there tonight. It's been a lengthy one tonight. Many thanks for your outstanding contributions as always, Rory and Kieran. I suppose next week we'll review the action from round 3 in Leinster, Munster and the Joe McDonagh Cup, and also look ahead to some more intriguing fixtures for the following weekend. Until then, enjoy the games of the weekend, guys. We'll chat next week.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.